Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Howard, a local defense attorney, and I am also host or hostess of the Safety Net, Brookline Interactive Group's show dedicated to domestic violence. But quite frankly, during COVID, we have expanded the issues that we cover on the Safety Net. And today is one of those expansions. We are most fortunate to have Lesley Ryan Miller, who is the Deputy Superintendent for Curriculum for the Brookline Public Schools, formerly the principal with a renowned reputation of the Pierce School in Brookline. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. This is a little bit different for the Safety Net. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, happy to. So first of all, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I have been in education for, about 25 years. I started my career in Boston Public Schools, where I was a kindergarten, first and second grade teacher. I was also a mentor for new teachers, and then worked in the superintendent's office, where I was the director of teacher development and advancement for Boston Public Schools. Was also an assistant principal in the district, but then in 2017 came to the public schools of Brookline as a senior director of K-8 teaching and learning, and was only in that position for a year when the then superintendent, Andrew Bott, said, well, we have this opening at the Pierce School. It happened really late in the summertime. Would you go there for a year? And I said, yes, I would love to. And 4 years later, I was still there. And now this year, I'm serving as the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning here in the Office of Teaching and Learning. So getting to know all of our schools in the public schools of Brookline, getting to know all of the curriculum. This office oversees the curriculum areas of performing arts, visual arts, world languages, ELA, science, math, social studies. I know I'm leaving something out. And so that's really important work because that is our core business in the public schools of Brookline, is the way that we educate our students. So I take this role really seriously. And it's just been a real joy getting into all of our schools and spending time with our educators and students. And then just personally, my husband, Harold, is also in education. We have a young daughter, Layla, who's in 4th grade at the Park School, where I'm also a trustee at the Park School. And I also serve on a board of an organization called Girls on the Run, which serves middle school girls. And is I think, really amazing in terms of bolstering their activity levels. So they do a lot of running. They work together and practice during their time in Girls on the Run for a culminating activity of a 5K run that they do together. And so while they do that, they also take time to talk about issues that impact young girls, friendships, social skills, social emotional development. And so they do both of those things. So that's another organization I'm really proud to be a part of.
Is this in Brookline, Girls on the Run?
We have Girls on the Run in Brookline. I think that we have it in all of our schools. I think there is maybe 1 or 2 schools where we're still looking for coaches, but we do have it in Brookline, and that's how I became familiar with it as the principal of the Pierce School. It was a program that was brought to the school by 2 teachers, and I saw how the girls just clamored to be in the program, and they loved it, and the bonds that they built with the coaches who were also teachers, the physical activity they got, and just became just an avid supporter, and then was later asked to be on the board. So,
Lesley, in your role as Deputy Superintendent, how do you fit into the curriculum, building healthy relationships, particularly for adolescents? In other words, how do you prepare them to see the red flags of abuse, of sexual harassment, of sexting, which I hear is going on? How is that woven into the curriculum? Because I know the AWARE curriculum is no longer used, and I know the SROs are no longer in the schools. But I'm just wondering what you're doing to replace what the SROs and the AWARE curriculum did, if anything.
Sure, sure. So that's a great question, Susan. And I think that, one, I want to give a shout out to Officer Danal and Officer McCabe, certainly who served as and technically those two officers that served the K-8s were not technically SROs, but were part of a program that also did help us implement the AWARE curriculum. And I certainly got to know them in my time as a Pierce principal. And so there was a lot of work that they did and supported us with. And so, to be really honest, Susan, we're rethinking how we make sure that those topics that were covered in AWARE continue to be covered in the absence of that program. And so one of the things that I certainly don't do alone, but do with the various coordinators who support their content areas, is look and think about where are the places where this is embedded in our curriculum and already integrated in our curriculum, and how do we make sure that all of our students have access to that information? So I think a really good example is our health and wellness curriculum, which is led by Carlin Uanama, who is the K-12 curriculum coordinator for health and wellness. And so, in preparation for today, she and I were having a discussion just about that curriculum. And so if I could just read to you.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the things that we really focus on in health and wellness is a skills-based curriculum. And so just to read to you, what is skill-based health? A planned, sequential, comprehensive, and relevant set of learning experiences implemented through socio-ecological and participatory methods to support the development of skills, attitudes, and functional knowledge needed to maintain, enhance our students across multiple dimensions of wellness. And so to kind of put that in more layman's terms,
please. Okay. Yeah.
Is as we think about our students, the whole child, really supporting them in how do they make healthy decisions across scenarios, across situations. So how do they know what a healthy relationship is? How do we talk to our students about the importance of consent? How do we talk to our students about bullying and anti-bullying? And so there is a lot of that practice and that theory that is embedded in the curriculums that we use in health and wellness, so that our students know what is healthy and how they make healthy choices. And we give them the skills to make healthy choices across disciplines, across scenarios, whether it's being in a healthy relationship, knowing what is bullying and saying something. So there's skills that we like to give them that we hope they will carry them into adulthood. And so that's one of the areas. And I think health and wellness, I think in terms of the focus of a lot of the work that you do, Susan, is around domestic violence. I think a lot of that work is embedded in the health and wellness curriculum, but it's also embedded in other curriculums, especially when we start talking about bullying, et cetera. So I think another good example, and I just totally lost my train of thought, is we have new social studies standards. And so this seems like a place where we may not think about the health of students, but there is also, there are standards there that support students with really learning how to access media. And when you are online, thinking about cyberbullying, your cyber footprint. So I think that what we really want to make sure is that this important information is not limited to one content area, but we see it integrated throughout our content areas and throughout the grades, so that children have multiple opportunities to engage with this content. It's not, I get it once in 7th grade, and if I missed it, it never comes back. The opportunity for students to get it over and over again across disciplines and with different educators, quite frankly. Because one thing we do know is the importance of the relationship between—
I was just going to ask you, how do they establish a trusting relationship if it's social studies on Friday and health maybe on Tuesday and something else on Monday? How do they know who they can go to, who they can trust if they are being abused, if they are being bullied, if they are being harassed? How because it seems to be sort of spread out. So is there one person? Maybe you can, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's actually, that is really a high leverage, a student having and being able to identify at least one caring and trusting adult in their school community. We know that that impacts their success. And so there's a lot of work that the Office of Student Services has been doing in relation to students' social emotional learning and development. And so we actually have a survey called the Panorama Survey that all of our students get in K to 12. And one of the most important questions that we really kind of hone in on when we get the results is that question. Do you have a trusting, caring adult that you can go to in your school community?
Do you assign a particular educator to, say, me, Susan Howard's a student, or is it just the student selects and then makes the initial approach?
Great question. So when students are identifying their trusting, caring adult, it could be anyone in the school building. We've seen it be the nurse. We've seen it be the principal, the teacher, the person who oversees recess. We've seen it be the guidance counselor, adjustment counselors. We've seen it across the board. Specifically for our children of color, they tend to identify practitioners and educators in the school who are related to the METCO program. If they're in the METCO program, all of our schools have METCO advisors. Oftentimes, they are identified for our students of color. Also in the Steps to Success program, there are Steps to Success advisors in each school, and many times they have been noted as the trusting and caring adult, specifically for our students of color. But other than that, it really depends on the school. So certainly children have advisors in many of the schools, and it depends on the school schedule, right? They could have a homeroom teacher that is kind of their point person, someone who teaches advisory, who's their point person, their guidance counselor. I'm not going to say all because schedules different. They're different across schools. But most schools do have that point person for a child. But I would say the data that we're collecting is more, it's self-reported, and they're not adults that have been assigned. They're adults that the child has just deemed, hey, this is a person I have a connection with. And if I really had an issue, that's who I would go to.
So would this person follow the student for the semester, the year, or all the way through? In other words, I'm looking to see if there's some consistency in the point person so that the student knows, oh, I'm going back to school, so-and-so's there, and that's my trusted advisor.
Yeah, so it's unfortunately it's not always a person that follows them throughout their school career. Hopefully it's a person who's in the building that they could still go to. I've certainly at my time at Pierce seen kiddos who, we have our guidance counselors assigned by K2, 3, 5, 6, 8. I have certainly seen a kiddo in middle school go back to their elementary guidance counselor as their trusted adult. So I think when they're in the building, that usually helps. But, typically it's not someone who follows a child through their school career, with the exception of there are programs which, if you watch last week's school committee meeting, Dr. Guillory, our superintendent, does a spotlight on excellence. And last week, Pierce had a spotlight, and they focused on Pierce Partners Mentoring Program, which in that case, a child is assigned a mentor, and that mentor is their mentor throughout their school career and even beyond the school. So for instance, I have a mentee, and we have been together. She's been my mentee for the past 2 years. And I'm no longer at Pierce, right? But she came over today. Her guidance counselor brought her over, and we had lunch together. We have lunch together every Monday. I see her outside of school.
That's exactly what I'm asking. So do you think you can see that in all of the schools, that somebody is trusted and they follow them throughout their career like you're doing? I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, so I can't say that we have that everywhere. I'm hoping we have it, I'm hoping that at least there are seeds in many of our schools, but I wouldn't be able to tell you, Susan, with all honesty, that it happens every place. But I think one of the first steps is this SEL data that we're collecting, because one of the things, and I can tell you all of our principals were really focused on, is that question of, does every child have a safe, caring, trusted adult that they can go to? And in some of the data, some of us were like, ooh, these numbers aren't what we want them to be. But the first step in getting better is having a sense of, oh, we have kiddos here who don't have someone who
what do you do?
Can trust.
What do you do then?
So that's the work, Susan. That's the real work.
That's big work.
Is how do we do that? And I think certainly one of the things that has helped is the addition of adjustment counselors.
I'm sorry, what kind of counselors?
Adjustment counselors. So they're a little different from guidance counselors in the aspect that they really hone in on social emotional support, and specifically supporting children who have been through trauma. So those were added to the budget as we, came out of the pandemic. Many districts have used a lot of their one-time funding for positions like that. And I'm really thankful that the public schools of Brookline made the commitment to use the one-time funding to bring these adjustment counselors on board, and then made a commitment to finding the funding to keep them beyond this year. So
Lesley, can I interrupt? Is an adjustment counselor a mental health worker?
They can be, yes, they can be. Many of them have clinical expertise.
Okay.
And many of them are connected with, like the Brookline Mental Health Center, and have those connections. So they have much more of an expertise in that area, Susan, than let's say a guidance counselor. Some of our guidance counselors certainly do, but I think just the term adjustment counselor has more of a link to social emotional health and mental health. Yes.
Because I'm hearing that post-COVID, there are a lot of mental health issues in the students because of the change and the fluctuation and how they learned, remote learning, in class, not in class, masking, et cetera. So that's good to know. We don't have that much time, so I want to give you an opportunity to discuss any issue you want to discuss. These have all been my issues.
Well, Susan, I'm just glad that you're talking about this. And it was great to meet with you and Rita not too long ago, and to see the focus on this, because one of the things that being an educator for a long time is that the social emotional of our students is incredibly important, because if we don't get that right, then the academic learning won't come. And so we've really got to hone in on this. And so I'm really glad that Brookline is looking at it seriously. I'm glad that we have town meeting members like yourself who are thinking about this, who are pushing us on this. And, certainly I know, kind of the elephant in the room is around the AWARE program and not having that any longer, and the SROs. And so, we're still working through that. We're still, always thinking about what is it that we need to put in place to make sure that, we have all the supports that we need for our young people and for our adults that are supporting young people. And for
the parents and the families. One last question from me. Are you aware of an uptick in bullying, sexual harassment, sexting? I know there's an uptick nationwide in the schools. And if so, how are you dealing with it outside of curriculum?
Yeah, so I've certainly heard, just with the use of more social media, we've gotten a lot of questions about the sexting. And from my perspective, one of the things that's important is making sure that support is embedded in our curriculum. But then also, what are the outside supports and kind of wraparound services that we can pull together to make sure that we're really working with the whole child? And I think that continues to be a work in progress.
So that's really difficult, isn't it?
It's hard. It's really hard getting everyone on the same page, and
training,
making sure that everyone is trained so that we're using the same language and that students across schools have equitable access. So it shouldn't matter. which school you're at.
Right.
Every school should have equitable access. They should have their counselors, support staff, educators should be trained in a really coherent fashion. And so I think that is a lot of the work that we're still doing. But thank you for acknowledging it's hard, Susan, because it is.
It is hard. Well, I'm a former teacher. I started out teaching 6th grade, and then I went on to college, be a college professor, because quite frankly, I didn't have the patience for the little ones. And I knew that. So, I wanted to have a name, not teacher. So I moved up and then I went to law school because the college basically closed. But I want to thank you, Lesley Ryan Miller, for being on the show today. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I sort of did. I'm glad that you're addressing these relational issues that are just so prevalent. There is a huge uptick in domestic violence, I can tell you from my practice, and child abuse. And bullying and everything that we've been talking about. So I wish you the best. I hope you will come back when you have everything in place. And if you have any how can people reach you, by the way?
Yes, please. So please reach out. My email is Lesley, Lesley _ Ryan, RYAN _ Miller, MILLER at psbma.org. And I'm looking at my phone. My extension my number is 617-730-2429. And so please feel free to reach out.
And maybe we can give that to Ian and we can run that at the bottom of the screen. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best in your endeavor. You have a lot on your plate. That's it for Safety Net. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Susan.